Welcome to Sustainability's Leading Voices, part of Britain's biggest sustainability campaign. This week is all about small businesses, and I'm joined by two guests to talk about the importance of small and micro businesses on the sustainability agenda and what the government should be doing to support them. A very warm welcome to Jill from the Organisation of Responsible Businesses and Sarah from the Good Business Club. Hi Jill, thank you for joining us today. Please can you tell us about the Organisation for Responsible Businesses?
We launched the Organisation for Responsible Businesses in 2010. We call it a movement for a better way of doing business. And we just felt that there was a lot of talk about corporate social responsibility, but it was aimed at the big corporates, and whatever you call it, it was very applicable to small businesses as well. And that's my passion. I'd spent 40 odd years working with small businesses as a management accountant. And when you're in that position, you're not just doing number crunching, you're HR, health and safety, project management. So I'd got a really good experience, knowledge of small businesses, their challenges, and I'm really quite passionate about them. So when we did a bit of research to see what was happening, it was very clear that not much. And as you do, we thought, well, we need to do something about that. So that was 2008 when we started thinking about it. We launched in 2010 as a membership organisation. So that's the core of what we do. And a year later, we also launched our Responsible Business Standard Certification that we developed in conjunction with Anglia Ruskin University and Quality Systems.
Given that you worked with Anglia Ruskin on the standard, how would you define a responsible business?
Our definition, and always has been, of a responsible business is one that operates efficiently and ethically, meets and exceeds legislation, and always considers people and the environment. That's praised slightly, but that's the essence of it.
So with that definition in mind, can you tell us a bit more about the standard and how it works in practice?
The Responsible Business Standards is really ESG for small businesses, which stands for environment, social and governance. And governance for small business is different for big business. So we've got 6 sections in that certification: workplace, community, marketplace, environment, ethics, values and transparency, and business processes. It's designed so that it's suitable for UK small businesses, starting from freelancers upwards. So it's a really robust and evidence-based, but it's suitable for even the smallest business.
Very warm welcome to our second guest, Sarah. Sarah, tell us about the Good Business Club.
Great. So the Good Business Club is a community of purpose-led business owners who are pledging to do business differently and supporting each other on that journey. Myself and my co-founder, Ruth Anslow, set it up 5 years ago because there weren't many spaces at that time to bring together like-minded people. And we really believe that business owners that are looking to do things differently and considering people and planet are actually really collaborative and open source, kind of very naturally in nature.
And how do you define a good business?
So at the Good Business Club, we've identified 6 different areas that businesses can look to do better business. 3 of those are more operational. So we've got employees, your clients and contracts, and your supply chain. And then you've got 3 that are more external. So your product and service, what are you putting out in the world, the local community that you exist in, and the bigger environment. So the planet, which is very topical at the moment as well.
And peer support is one of the key components of the Good Business Club membership. What are the benefits of peer support to small businesses?
Yeah, so I think one of the key benefits that I would say around peer support is no one gets the journey like your peers. You might talk to someone who's got specialist skills or consultant who works in a certain area who can, fill those knowledge gaps. But some of them haven't actually run businesses, particularly, let's say, kind of micro and small businesses, or been self-employed, been a freelancer.
Why should businesses be prioritising their ethics and their sustainability? And why should business owners be thinking about becoming a good, responsible, ethical business?
I think the key thing, if you're a business right now not thinking about this or thinking about it in some consideration, the key thing is that it will become a legal requirement, absolutely. But I'd say even more importantly to a business is that your customers are starting to request it, and talent that are going to be joining your team. It's the necessity now in terms of what they want to do. They want to be working with organizations that are aligning to their personal missions. Customers are, dropping brands and choosing alternatives that have a more, aligned more with their ESG values. So if you aren't actually considering this, you're not future-proofing your business and you will be made redundant.
Jill, can you talk us through some of the main barriers to starting a sustainable business?
That's a really interesting question because it can be translated in so many ways. My immediate answer is, well, there's no real barrier other than any barriers for starting any other business. But then it's, well, what do we mean by a sustainable business? Because actually, you go into business with the intention of it being sustainable, i.e., in the context of lasting for a long time. In that context, that's why everyone starts a business, because they want to keep it going. So it's this word, sustainable, is quite a funny word, really, isn't it? And then you might think, well, when you're talking about sustainable business, do you mean a business that is actually providing very specific sustainability related goods and services? Or do you mean just a normal business, in inverted commas, that ensures they operate in a very sustainable way? So a way that is good for business, but also good for people and the environment.
You make a really good point there, Jill, about distinguishing between businesses that start because they are tackling a social or an environmental problem, and that mission is really baked in from the beginning and that's their entire focus. And then, like you said, normal, in inverted commas, businesses that aren't starting from that place, but then want to make that transition to operate in a more ethical and sustainable way. Sarah, you have members on both sides of that. What do you see as the biggest challenge for the ones that do have that mission at their heart and that are really starting from that place of wanting to solve a social or environmental problem?
The biggest challenge I've come up against with working with businesses that are more sustainable is normally the lack of a commercial mindset. Actually very similar from my experience with just starting up any business. And a lot of the time it comes down to focusing on the wrong elements of the business in the early stages. And I think what you end up doing is focusing more on the impact than actually the financial sustainability of the whole model, whereas it really needs to be flipped the other way.
That commercial acumen is really key to business success. We know that. And what we see in the sustainability and the impact space so often is brands coming up against that attitude behaviour gap. They will put their sustainability messaging or their ethical credentials front and centre of their entire brand. But we know from consumer data that while consumers say they want those things, actually it does come down to price and convenience, and they will prioritise those factors when it actually comes to spending their money.
I think you're absolutely right, Sian, because it is back to the whole thing. You go back to basics, and whatever else people want, they want the right goods at the right prices. And sometimes, because you've gone through certain processes or you've avoided certain materials to make sure that it fits the environmental credentials that you want, the products are more expensive. So it's really important to make sure you've got that double message out. Hey, I've got this wonderful product that will do X, Y, Z for you. So what's the benefit for the client, for your potential purchaser? But it is also does this for the environment or for whatever. So it needs to be a two-way message, doesn't it? So you're talking about both.
And while it's not necessarily the ultimate reason that someone would buy from you, it's still important to talk about your ethical and sustainable credentials and to showcase what makes you a good, responsible business, just making sure that you do that in the right way from a marketing perspective. But obviously, we're seeing more and more legislation come in around these terms and what green claims you can make and how you make them. And I think we see a lot of fear, really, from brands that are doing the right thing, but are scared to put that out there and scared to talk about that in case they get a backlash for maybe not doing enough or they get called out for something. And what would you say, Jill, about brands navigating that fear and being able to confidently talk about what makes them responsible as a business?
I agree with you totally. I think there's a lot more fear than there actually needs to be. And the big word that I use and bore people to tears, because I keep saying it, is it's be authentic. Whatever you're saying, whatever you're doing, be authentic. Don't do it because you're ticking the box. So if you're saying you're doing something because you really are doing it, then actually, clearly that's not going to be a problem. The big area with the greenwashing, and as you mentioned, the CMA, and interestingly, they're not actually new regulations because it's always been there, but they're just enforcing them now, aren't they? And I was really pleased when they introduced that, when they said that was coming out. But I was also a little bit nervous that quite often you see legislative things that are good, but the people that are implementing them go for easy targets. And I thought, they might be going for small businesses because they're easy targets. And actually, it's very, very clear they're not doing that. And they would sooner, they've gone for some of the big businesses, but it's very much about warning, helping and encouraging you to do the right things. And again, the big thing with any small businesses, it's about if you make any claims, if you have environmental goods or services, anything you say, you need to be able to back up. So, even just saying something is green, what does green mean? It's a word that people fling about. Well, don't, clearly. But if it's a very specific claim you're making, just make sure you've got the evidence to back that up.
Jill, based on your experience of supporting thousands of micro and small businesses in this country, what should the government be doing to give them more support?
I would say the starting point for policies is to ensure that the pay in 30 days is legislative, not an optional, because for a lot of small businesses, the impact on their cash flow when they're dealing with bigger companies is horrendous. We so often see really good companies going into liquidation, not because they haven't got the right goods and services at the right price or running properly, but it's a purely cash flow issue, because at the end of the day, cash flow is king.
And Sarah, given that we are in the midst of a climate emergency and over the last few years we've seen increasing social challenges, what can the government be doing to really support the SMEs, the micro businesses, with that social and environmental mission at their core that are really setting out to tackle some of these challenges? What changes and policies and support do we need to be seeing to ensure that they survive and thrive?
So what governments can do, and I think should do at this time, is be more lenient and prioritize businesses that have an agenda to support both people and planet in some way as well. So whether that's lower corporation tax, whether that's lower business rates, other incentives financially to enable them to manage cash flow, manage their models, particularly through this more challenging time, is going to enable them to be more sustainable, more robust, and last harder times. And one of the actions around that would be encouraging businesses to report on their impact the same way we're reporting every year on our finances. Offering some guidance around this, having the transparency and accountability would ensure that we're all on the same page and working to the same goals. And it shows our commitment and priority around this, not just profit.
Sarah's made some brilliant points there about taxation, business rates, how the government could create more support for these businesses through those processes, and also how that transparency could be embedded into the accounting process. What about grant funding, given that micro businesses and SMEs make up such a big proportion of employment and such a big contribution to the economy in this country? What support should be available to them, Jill?
Oh, I think that's really important. Obviously, it needs to be done properly. I think a lot of grant funding that is currently available is focused on either this whole growth area, or it's focused on the social enterprise scheme, a social enterprise approach. And there's very little that actually looks and says, if we support these small businesses, you've got someone working, you've got someone contributing.
And we've got a huge problem in this country that our high streets are just being left empty, and that the big businesses are leaving the high streets because of the cost of that retail space. How could grant funding really bring back the high street and enable that to support the micro businesses and the SMEs?
Grant funding done appropriately for micro and small businesses could actually be the key to getting our high streets up and running and getting really vibrant and flourishing high streets that we all need, we all want. And yet the small businesses that can be really doing something so positive are just left out.
We've talked about some really practical actions that could be taken to support micro businesses and SMEs in this country, but we know that those actions are going to cost money, and the next government will have lots of different priorities to juggle. So why should taking these actions be a priority for the next government?
If all parties aren't prioritising micro and small businesses in the election, next time we are looking to who we want to be in government, then they're doing a disservice not just to those businesses, but also to society and to our planet, because it's those businesses that are going to make the greatest positive difference.
What an important and inspiring message to end on, Jill. A massive thank you to Jill and to Sarah for joining us tonight for this brilliant chat all about small businesses. We will share links as to where you can find the Organisation for Responsible Businesses and the Good Business Club online. And if you are watching this live, do come over and join the Ethical Hour Twitter chat starting now. And don't forget to head to ethicalhour.com and have your say by taking our survey on the support that SMEs and micro businesses should be receiving from the next government.